morning, everyone. Uh, Thank you, Singapore FinTech Festival and UNCDF for giving me and this panel this space and the opportunity for an important discussion. Welcome, Arundhati, Teresa, and Subbalakshmi to this important discussion on connecting women entrepreneurs to markets and finance through technology. I just want to preface the discussion by asking the question, why is connecting women entrepreneurs to markets and finance via tech important at all? One of the most important reasons is that the benefits from connections to markets and finance via financial inclusion are very significant. I want to quote two important studies. One was an impact evaluation by Dwara KGFS in Tamil Nadu in India. It has mostly women customers, and after 5 years of presence of the Dwara KGFS branches, some pretty significant outcomes were noted. One was that the incidence of outstanding formal borrowing for largely women customers, 90% plus women customers, was 40% higher. That was number one. Two, also very significant, informal borrowing also reduced by almost 11%. And, this informal borrowing is generally at rates of 50% plus, almost double or more than double the formal interest rate. So we can see that the presence and these connections really make a difference to the lives of women and the households they work in. Similarly, in Kenya, a study was conducted that found that access to mobile money services alone, just the plain payment services, delivered really big benefits. So it enabled women-headed households to actually increase their savings by more than a fifth. It allowed almost 185,000 women to leave farming and develop other business or retail activities. And it had an impact also on extreme poverty by about 22%. Now, what has been happening recently is that, at least in terms of access to financial services, the gender gap due to Jan Dhan has reduced quite a bit. Apparently, this has reduced, the gender gap is reduced from 20% to 6%. However, when you look at the story in more detail, there is a lot more to be done in terms of usage of these accounts. 40% of these accounts are dormant. Something like 23% of women still don't have access, which means that 65% of women still have zero actual access to finance and therefore markets. And therefore, how do we solve for this and really use the power of finance and markets to change lives, to get to people's real life goals? I think each of you have a really important perspective in this discussion. So I would like to invite each of you, starting with Arundhati, then Subbalakshmi, then Teresa, to provide a short introduction about your work in this area.
You want me to start?
Arundhati, if you could get started, that would be great.
Okay. So a quick intro. I work with the SME segment, working with them to help them access larger clients. I have a background of having worked with very large organizations like Accenture, TCS, and the CK Birla Group. And I try to bring in the best practices from large organizations into the medium-sized organizations in terms of accessing the markets and accessing global markets. I try my best to make medium-sized organizations more ambitious. That has been my number one focus, to let them know that, having seen both large organizations very, very closely for over 20 years, I don't feel that there is a lot of difference in the quality of people that are there, but the significant differences in the ambition that corporates have, or even startups with hardly any business, they have more ambition than SMEs, and that is what I work on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Arundhati.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah. Thanks for getting us started on this conversation. I think this is such an important sort of dialogue for us to have. I work at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I work on the gender team and I'm based out of the India office. A lot of our work really is in making sure that women are part of this whole story of the digital revolution. I think a lot of our work is made easier because of ongoing domestic efforts for, G2P payments around, the social benefits, etc. And I know that we'll go into the details of some of, the existing gaps and how the gender divide still persists. But our effort is really in two kinds of areas. One is to build the learning and evidence around what is working. So we invest a lot of our energies in research and in actually generating data and evidence to see what's working on ground, what's not working, how can that inform better policy and program design, etc. So that's really one important part of what we do. The other is demonstrating it and testing innovations in partnership with a range of fantastic sort of organizations. We have a range of partners, both government and non-governmental. And really our idea is a lot of our work is centered around the assumption that group-based approaches are very powerful in helping women to access economic opportunities, digital assets, and markets. And I'll talk a little bit more about that eventually. But I think a lot of our programming work is centered around support to women's collectives. As collectives and not just as individual women, because let's remember that a lot of our focus is really on low-income households. So these are the broad areas in which we work. My own background is I've been in the gender space for the last 16, 17 years and have had the privilege of working with UN Women on the Women's Economic Empowerment portfolio, and before that with women's rights organizations at the grassroots. A lot of what I've learned is really at the grassroots. So I look forward to this engaging conversation as we move ahead.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, hi, my name is Teresa Matthew. I lead investments in financial inclusion at Omidyar Network India. We are an investment firm focused on social impact. And over the last decade, we've had the privilege of partnering many bold entrepreneurs like Sucharita, who are leveraging, the power of technology to make financial services more affordable, accessible, and convenient for the next 500 million consumers. Our fintech portfolio spans 13 companies, addressing lending, savings, insurance, as well as neobanks. We have a dual checkbook approach, which means that, apart from doing these, venture style investments with strong impact filters, we also invest in research, which helps us understand and address structural impediments to financial inclusion. And, look forward to sharing some of the learnings as well as learning from, this panel on how we can move this agenda forward.
Great. Thanks so much, Teresa. In fact, just taking off from your introduction, I know that Omidyar has actually done some very important work in, really analyzing reasons that drive this gender divide. Why at all does it exist? We need to, I think, start from that place. Could you throw some light on this matter? I know that a lot of important work has been done, especially on the emerging customer in developing markets.
Sure, yeah. So about 3 years ago, we went to 30 communities across India and spoke to hundreds of customers as part of a study called the Currency of Trust. And our objective really was to bring the voice of the customer to the forefront of this discussion around adoption and usage of digital financial services in India. And this study gave us some key behavioral insights that reveal why Indian consumers, particularly women, are slow to adopt digital financial services. Firstly, greater access to digital finance for women really requires developing safe spaces that enable them to own and use mobile phones and data. The perception that smartphones are primarily associated with entertainment and social media really drives a significant gender divide in smartphone ownership as well as usage. There is this inherent fear that smartphones will expose women to bad influences, because of which many men refuse to provide women in the family with a smartphone, and in many cases, any type of phone. Secondly, digital financial services are viewed by most people, particularly women, as overly complex, and this applies even to financially savvy consumers. This is evident from the fact that, like Sucharita mentioned earlier, despite most people having open bank accounts due to various government schemes, this has not resulted in everyday usage of these accounts. And this is due to a combination of factors, including, lack of ability to understand the heavy use of jargon by formal financial services providers, and sometimes just the apathy and outright disrespect which many of these consumers have experienced during interactions with formal financial service providers, which is what leads them to have a strong preference for alternative services such as self-help groups or microfinance institutions, chit funds, pawnbrokers, or even private money lenders, despite them being far more expensive. And thirdly, financial services agents, particularly those who are visible and active within the community, are very crucial in inspiring trust. And for customers, service proximity really means touch points that are frequent and available when they need help, rather than simply having a large number of branches, which may be even close to their location geographically. So many consumers in India are comfortable interacting with in-person agents for their financial services needs, due to the agent's proximity, familiarity, and of course, respectful conduct. So these were some of the, behavioral insights that, the study helped us with.
No, that's super interesting because, it touches upon some cultural aspects like, in general, the paternalistic attitude of, women and their need to be protected from bad influence to, really things like trust, respect, which at the end of the day, every human being wants, especially if you're a consumer, you expect at the bare minimum to be treated with respect. Arundhati, I just wanted to take this discussion over to you. You mentioned an important point around ambition and vision of women entrepreneurs, and the lack of it today. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience here? Could this be a reason as well for the gender divide? And what can we do about this?
That is the single most, women are tackling more, right? The women entrepreneurs are tackling more, women professionals are tackling more. Women have come out and started working, but men haven't started working at home, right? The pandemic has given that kind of, there have been some good things about the pandemic in that the men have started doing housework as well. But it is traditionally, it is seen that women are tackling more, and therefore they have probably less mind space, and they're continuing with something that is working okay instead of thinking, how can I make it better? How can I grow this better? Technology today has become no longer a choice, right? Earlier, it was a good to have. It was required if you were scaling and things like that. So it was a choice that you made. Today, access to markets has become primarily through technology. So the adoption of technology is something that women have started. I have seen more acceptance of technology in the last 5-6 months than before. That is number one. But is it where it should be? I think far from it. And access to markets, therefore, is limited because of the lack of access to, lack of comfort with technology or lack of usage. As a solution, we can always think about all the things that are not happening. But from a solution perspective, I would like to, bring in some best practices from the corporate sector or the startup segments in as well. The startup segment is very comfortable going to you, for example, as a mentor. Can you mentor me? Can you do this for me? Can you help me? Can you help me get me some money? Can you help me connect me to so and so government official? Can you help me to So startups are always asking, right? No matter what they get and don't get, they're asking. And that is something that the cohort model that startups have, where there are, I think Teresa was talking about, Subbalakshmi was talking about, bringing together groups of people. I think the model that the startups are using in terms of cohorts is a great model and should be done at, we are seeing that kind of model at the village level or at the base level, but I think there should be a kind of a tree at every level. There should be we should see cohorts forming up, and women helping each other. Women-led organizations see more women as employees as well. If you traditionally, if you see a women-led organization, the gender balance is much better. And therefore, when you tackle women-led organizations through a cohort at a particular level, it generally percolates down as well. Educated women taking on highly educated women as CEOs of mid-sized companies like 50 crore or 30 crore companies will have more women employees, and therefore, some of them will want to go out and be an entrepreneur themselves, just like it happens in any other SME. So if you get into that model where you create those cohorts at various levels rather than only at the lower level, targeting only, women at the village level and illiterate or semi-literate women, you start at the very top and say that, just like startups have cohorts, can we create a model like that where SME women leaders, also have cohorts, and then, they employ more women and it percolates down.
No, thanks so much for that perspective. Also, apologies for my background noise. What I'm hearing from you is really two things. One is women leading by example that, really impacts other women. Also collectives, the power of collectives is huge. What we see in our own operations is that even for a simple transaction like depositing money into your bank account, even if the bank account or cash-in point is just 3 to 4 kilometers away, it's still not walking distance. And because of women's safety issues in most places in the north, women have to go in groups, just literally to do that simple transaction. Or if they're not in a group, then they have to depend on a male relative to deposit that money, which may or may not happen. So, the barriers that are there are pretty significant, but I do think that this group, this concept of a group, and you made a very good point, group at all levels, right? Not just at, the level of a village or the level of a self-help group, but at higher levels as well. Really makes a difference. Just want to pull in Subbalakshmi here. Subbalakshmi, you mentioned that you've done a lot of work on collectives and the power of collectives. What have you found here? Are there solutions to this gender divide from, the evidence-based research and, innovations that you have conducted here?
Yeah, thanks, Sucharita. So I do think that, a lot of what drives the gender divide is at both levels. I mean, there is the infrastructural and access gap, which is fundamental. And then there is the socio-cultural context, which is what, many of us have been talking about. And I think in terms of the kind of the socio-cultural issues are not very difficult to understand, because what is happening in sort of a real world in terms of the operation of gender norms, greater monitoring and surveillance of women when they're using digital assets, all of that is really affecting their ability to transact online. At the same time, we know the gap is the smallest when it comes to the access to government and social entitlements. While we have, in terms of smartphone use, in terms of internet use, the gap between men and women is like 50-60% and beyond. But when it comes to accessing these G2P kind of programs, the gap is the lowest between men and women. So I think I think there is an important point there, which is the fact that it is from a credible, legitimate source. And I think that affects a lot the ability of the women to exercise their agency. So that's one. The second is what the group does is, and particularly Teresa, you spoke about, the facilitation and intermediation at the sort of community level. I mean, we work mainly with low income households, so my experience is mainly from that lens. That facilitation is really, really important, because you have to build trust about the use of the platform, about, there are beliefs about, where is my money going? I'm doing all of this online transaction. There is a lot of mistrust and sort of lack of confidence in the usage. And what we've seen happen is when these sort of banking correspondents, the facilitators, intermediary people are actually the ones who are people of trust, who are going to the community and who are going to the women and saying, hey, this is how you do it, and I can do it, and so can you. That leader plays a really important role. And I think that's something we've learned in programming, that huge investments are required in building that leadership cadre as well, because they become then the bridge between the service, the use of the digital asset, and help also in supporting the negotiations and the bargaining power at the family community level. So I think there are many, many spin-offs on that, on the benefits of the collective in how it can help to bridge the gender digital divide. Because I mean, these are really age-old structural barriers we are talking about, and so it's not easy to overcome them. And these are some of the ways in which we have seen it works. I mean, COVID has really caused this forced digitization that we didn't anticipate, and it is simply because of the presence of these leaders and these community resource persons, these banking correspondents, the women whose capacities have been built over the last many years, that we've seen that those networks have managed to access digital financial services. They've managed to access greater opportunities, awareness. Even something like e-commerce is something that is really booming, and it's growing big even in the villages. And I feel that a lot has to do with that kind of investment in capacity building, investment in leadership that has really gone in over the last many, many years through a range of actors.
Right. Just a follow-up question, Subbalakshmi, is could you point to any, specific examples or research which actually shows the impact of this, collective on access or on outcomes?
So we've actually done very, very extensive evidence review of all of our work that we've supported in the last many years with women's collectives, and large part of them are the self-help groups promoted by the National Rural Livelihoods Mission in India. And it's really interesting that of all the systematic review, evaluations, etc., our partners have done, they have found the financial inclusion outcomes are the strongest. I mean, they're the ones which where we have without fail seen strong outcomes. So there is research that our partners have done, pulled together evaluative studies, done a systematic review. There is an evidence gap map that our partners have developed. I can share all of that with you because it has a compilation of all the studies done in that space, and happy to share those resources, with everyone.
Sure. Thanks so much. Yeah, so I think in these discussions we are uncovering some important solutions. I think one, we are saying more women leaders. Two, we're also saying how do we promote more women's collectives, and how do we do this in a structured, systematic way? Clearly, we need much more, because it always feels to me like the pace of change is positive, but it still feels too slow. So which brings me to the next, obvious gap, which is access to capital. It's very well demonstrated that, for example, even startups like myself, for instance, with even one women founder, I think they get only 12% of all VC funding. So there is a gap, literally at this level. And, and I'm clearly a product of privilege, right? I'm not the average person. So if there is a, divide here, how do organizations like yourself, and this question is for you, Subbulakshmi and Teresa, how does your investment thesis really drive the bridging of this gender divide?
Sure. Do you want me to go first? I mean, happy to take that. Your question.
Sure.
So I think that's a really important question, and I think impact investing is growing. Gender lens investing as a field is growing. I believe it is still very, very nascent when it comes to the Indian context. I don't think we have fully understood what the value of impact investing is for business, for growth, for us as a society. And so I just want to give that caveat. I do also want to say that, I think there are many ways in which sort of, there is a role for boosting economic activity, women's entrepreneurship, and job creations. I think that's one important thing that we have seen happening, right? If there are targets for gender lens investing, if there is, if there are specific indicators that one is tracking to do with gender parity or inclusion, then we have seen outcomes. We have seen women's entrepreneurship grow. We have seen a range of different tools, impact bonds, and range of things, right? I still think that, and again, I will speak from my experience of working with the low-income communities, with the women's collective enterprises. I don't think we've done much thinking in that space. I don't think we have customized services and products catering to that market. I also feel like there are very few models. One of our projects is really with SEWA, the Self-Employed Women's Association, where we are trying to generate that kind of a model of an enterprise support system, which is more bottom up. And we haven't seen any accelerator models that are focusing on women's collective social enterprise. I believe this is possibly the first ever in, I don't know, India and the world. I don't know. So, but we do know that these are the kinds of innovations that are going to tell us. I mean, clearly, Seva, 40 years of experience, 200 plus social enterprises. There is a lot of learning that we can draw from that experience in terms of how to design those customized services and products. So, and I feel there is a gap in the engagement between how that impact investment is being designed and how the women are perceiving and receiving the benefits of it. And I do feel people like us in the ecosystem have an important role to bridge that gap. Through our research, through dialogue, through panels like this, and I feel like that's really one area in which I think we need much more work in the creation of economic activity in a structured manner, the flowing of finance in suitable forms to the women's enterprises. But I think there is another important role, for instance, that people like us play in philanthropic foundations, which is also helping to create that ecosystem around this. I mean, the reason why this dialogue is important, or the reason why we engage with policymakers, or we make sure our research is disseminated to a range of stakeholders, is because we think that the ongoing conversation of making the case of why gender equality is good business is an ongoing one. That's something that we have to keep at. And I do feel that there is a huge role for us to play in creating that ecosystem over and above the direct support that comes through, flowing the resources directly to women entrepreneurs. So I think that ecosystem engagement is really critical at this point, especially in a post-COVID world where we have seen enterprises collapse, we have seen supply chains really, break. We've seen financial distress. I think in many ways, we really have to get our act together as a community to think what next.
Absolutely. No, thanks so much, Subbalakshmi. Teresa, just, repeating the question. I was just keen to see, how organizations like yourselves, very few and far between, how does your investment thesis really drive the bridging of this gender divide?
Sure. Yeah. So I think limited, financial awareness, social and cultural norms around women's economic participation, caretaking responsibilities, will all be there as barriers which will keep women from realizing their full entrepreneurial potential. So what we try to do is to invest in businesses that can build solutions which are designed and delivered within the context of these realities that women, operate in. So our portfolio has businesses like Seva Grih Rin, which specifically provides home loans to women in the informal segment. Their aim is to improve the quality of life for women in the informal segment by creating a tangible financial asset in their name, and 100% of their loans have a woman as a main applicant. Kaleidofin is another great example of a company that's helping informal segment customers save towards their life goals. And again, 97% of Kaleidofin's customers are women, whom they're able to serve through a tech-assisted model. And what we really hope is that the success of these models will have strong demonstration effects and will help channel more pools of capital towards impact investing. And we're really, and Sucharita can talk more about this, about how Kaleidofin is able to leverage the power of women influencers within the network to encourage more women to adopt the formal financial system for saving towards their life goals. So, really, I think, it is these demonstration effects which we think, will help channel more capital to women entrepreneurs as well as women-focused businesses.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the role of women helping other women, really cannot be underestimated. We at KaleidoFin, we have a feet on street program called Kaleido Assist, which is a customer rewards and recognition program, really. But these are our smartest customers. 1,200 of them in about 500 pin codes in the country, whose really their only job is to motivate customers to keep saving towards their goals, help out customers in the onboarding, which has a lot of friction still, right? It's not buying financial services, not the same as ordering food. That's much quicker, right? Nobody asks, do you have diabetes before you order a gulab jamun? That's not expected. But in finance, of course, there is a role to be played in making sure suitable finance is being offered. So the friction points are also much higher. Getting together even the most basic documentation required for KYC is sometimes quite a struggle, and women need help from other women who are more clued in, who are more like leaders, business owners in that area. And we've seen that impact to be quite powerful. So, for example, in the last 2-3 months alone, these 1,200, Kaleido Assist women entrepreneurs have brought in about 8 to 10,000 new customers into the fold, and improved the payment rates as well quite a bit. Also, I do think that designing better products for women is very important. And I'm sure everybody will have examples here, but I want to start with one of my own. In Gujarat, we found that, anonymity of savings was a very important criteria. So the woman did not want, in particular, her husband, and in general, other members of her family not to know about the saving, the amount of saving, because she felt that the savings would be at risk and they would just get spent if other people know. So, for example, our initial go-to-market hypothesis was husband has a smartphone. So let's use the husband's smartphone to get the woman access to financial services. And it broke down, right? Because, this sort of pretty important requirement of anonymity can simply not be met if you do that. They said that, hey, you know what, why don't you take my neighbor's smartphone or my neighbor's number, another woman who I trust, with this information, and send messages to me on my feature phone. And, we had to account for that in the design. Because clearly it was a very important condition, and we have to respect that. And again, this is a socio-cultural reason, right? I mean, there are good reasons why women feel this way. But I think the design aspect is also important. I wonder if you've come across, other such examples of designing better solutions to take into account women's requirements. Are there any that come to mind?
Yeah, sure. I could, I've seen the example of Seva Grihin again, which is an affordable housing finance company targeting women customers at from the informal segment. And these women invariably utilize, their homes as their workplace. And a lot of the home loans are used for home improvement to make these spaces more suitable for work. So Seva Grihin has a fully in-house cluster-based sourcing approach with no dependence on intermediaries whatsoever. And they guide borrowers through the entire process of formalization of property documents. They also actively hire women in their branches. In fact, they have 1 or 2 branches which are fully staffed by women. Just to make the branch experience more comfortable for their customers.
No, thanks
so I
so
think
much.
that's a really important point that Teresa said. The principle of creating housing because the home is the workplace, and therefore it's a productive asset in the name of women. And there is a similar example again from Seva that I've come across earlier in this clean energy space, which is really designing products, solar lamps, etc. So really creating a cadre of women entrepreneurs who were servicing their communities by providing these products, but which also had a spillover effect on their enterprises, because now they had lighting, suitable lighting for them to continue their home-based work, which is more than 53% of the informal workers are home-based workers, right? Enabling workplace, etc. for women entrepreneurs. I think those are important principles in the design. I completely agree with you, Sucharita, that I think thoughtful design is going to be at the heart of us really seeing some of this transformative change.
Absolutely. Arundhati, just want to pull you in here as well. I think you probably have the most direct experience in really consulting with SMEs, but I'm sure there have been many women entrepreneurs. Are there any solutions here from your experience?
So I have seen networks like Women in Innovation, which is a global network, of course, but Women in Innovation, that is something, a very active network, which is helping women to take some models forward. So you get to learn a lot from, I do bring in, unlike Teresa and Subbalakshmi, I do bring in the middle layer of my interactions have been from the middle layer, which is well educated, medium level income group of community. But I have seen a lot of impact when they get together as well, and the impact that is there is flows down as well, and therefore this is the neglected middle is something that I like to is the reason why I left large organizations and started working with the middle organizations. There's a lot of support and a lot of collaboration that is happening at the top and in the bottom or the lower part, but this is a neglected middle. And I think personally I felt that this middle has a huge role to play, and the cascading effect that this group can have is immense. And groups like Women in Innovation, etc., are groups which are trying to do this. There are some cohorts, there are some incubators as well, which are doing it at the startup level. But I think that the impact that the middle can have, because these are primarily people, the problem is spread out and it's large, right? It is not a small problem, and it's spread out. How spread out can you get with and therefore if you do not have that kind of a network or a tree kind of an effect, then we need perhaps to create that, where we take the support of these highly educated women with significant resources and ability to use these resources to build organizations and build cohorts or lead cohorts, which are one person handle 10 at that level, or one person, like we all mentor startups. I don't mentor a single SME outside my client set, so nobody has ever reached out to me, whereas I get every week almost I get one request from a startup to mentor them, whereas from a SME segment, there's no such concept at all, and that is something that I think can have a huge impact, and that is a primary reason why I decided to work with this middle, because I think it's an underserved segment.
Yeah. No, I think you're making a very important point that this sort of lack of access to markets, technology, actually it cuts across many levels. It's not just an issue that let's say women with low income, with lower levels of education face. Equally, it's an issue that women with higher levels of education and access to, let's say, the skills that are required to run a business, they also, face these challenges. But, just coming back a little bit to the, to 2 points here, and I think, maybe we can have a deeper discussion around 2 points. We are hearing a lot of names of organizations, right, that have like Seva Griharin, Seva Bank, which have done a lot and achieved a lot for their customers. But, the issue is we keep hearing the same names. There are clearly not enough organizations, right? How do we go from, one Seva to, 1,000 Sevas, 10,000 Sevas? Why isn't this happening on its own? Is it lack of access to capital? What is stopping the replication of some of these super successful models? And again, I have the same question on providers of capital, which is very few impact investors exist. How do we have more flow of capital? Maybe, please feel free to take any one question, but I do think it's a dual problem.
So, if I may, clearly we need more people, more organizations, right? And the number that is required is huge. That it is not 1 or 2, increasing to 10 is not enough. If we have to tackle it in a country like India, if we have to, the demographic dividend will not come if we don't get women at multiple levels included, right? The women is, a large part of the population, and a large part, and the more, more effective population, if I may call it that, so therefore,
yes, just want to say, completely agree with that.
So, more focused, more result oriented, less ego, more experimental. I would say these things about women having worked with men and women, and not having, thought much in terms of men and women too much. But, when I see, women out there, obviously, we're more open to experiments. We're less egoistic, more open to learning, more effective, therefore. And in that case, if you have to create an army, then, we have to have that model where women educated women need to take up some responsibilities and say that, I will mentor, or I will, I will be another Seva in addition to my work, in a smaller scale. But if we can create a model where we have, just like incubators are there for startups, and we have something like that for women-led organizations, and we take it in a cascading effect, I think that could be an answer to the scale that is required.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if I may add, I think we also need to see, more examples from other sectors. I think, like you mentioned, the cooperative banks, the MFIs, I mean, in my own home state of Kerala, we have Kudumbashree, which is a powerful poverty eradication and women's empowerment program, which is implemented by the government. And with a membership of 4.5 million women, it's one of the largest women's networks in the world. But outside of these examples, I think with the increasing digitization of the economy and small businesses in particular, the growth of social commerce, we do hope to see such examples in other sectors. I mean, in our own edtech portfolio, for example, we've seen companies like White Hat Junior, pioneer a new live online model of teaching, enabling thousands of teachers, all women, to participate in the workforce. Likewise, there are social commerce platforms which are empowering millions of women to become entrepreneurs. So I think the power of based models to help bring them within the formal financial system, and also create new opportunities for employment and entrepreneurship will be created with the whole digitization of the economy and small businesses.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do think that government regulation has a role to play here. Just because this divide has existed for centuries, so to do something about it is going to take probably, at least in my view, some affirmative action. Otherwise, it's just going to be too slow. Otherwise, we can stare at a 0.2% change per year and congratulate ourselves. But in the macro, not enough would have happened. I'm just wondering whether, there is a way to, equally saying, how do we have many more Omidyar networks? How do we have many more BMGFs around? There clearly aren't enough. I can tell you, as an entrepreneur, there are not enough. But at the same time, there's a huge focus on SDG financing. And there is huge evidence that suggests that businesses that are led by women, that empower women, both, have a huge impact on SDGs like good health, well-being, decent work, economic growth. Is there a way to sort of shape markets such that these SDGs somehow can be evaluated and given as much weight as financial returns, given that these are important as well? Could we come at this another way and say that this is a great way to actually get to the SDGs and bring much more capital in to this space?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to just add to what Arundhati and Teresa were speaking about earlier. I think this has to be incentivized. And I feel you absolutely hit the nail on the head that clearly it's regulatory authorities that have to get into the business of affirmative action, recognizing that the level playing field does not exist between men and women. And I do believe that there could be ways of, looking at incentivizing, and it doesn't necessarily have to be monetary incentives, right? Even, there could be a whole range of incentives for impact investors, bringing together good practices, rewarding those good practices. There is a lot that can be done if we were to put our heads together and think creatively. I do think we need to pool all of the good practice as well, because there is a lot happening out there in pockets. But I feel like I'll come back to my earlier point, is that I think when women are coming together and have access to finance, are running their businesses, you all said it. I mean, they do it well, they do it better than anybody else. So I think a lot of our emphasis right now should be on the ecosystem. How do we make sure that the financial markets are convinced about designing these products and services in a way that are beneficial to women? How do we build capacities of people, who are making these decisions? How do we all come together as a community, as a collective, to lend our voice to some of these issues? To me, I think that's really where we have reached now, where a lot of the, sort of our engagement needs to happen, is of course elevating what's happening on ground, incentivizing, gender lens investing. In some ways, there could be creative ways, and really putting together good practices that can be replicated, that can be scaled across the sector. So these were sort of the additional thoughts that I wanted to add to what, and completely agree with everything that Teresa and Arundhati also mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I'm also thinking of initiatives like green bonds, carbon credits, which have really directed a lot of capital, let's say, into one of the SDGs, which is clean water, clean air, which we know is to me, it seems like providing access to markets, to tech, to finance for women is just as important as clean air and clean water. And therefore, a system of incentivizing more capital to flow into these areas and more mainstream capital seems necessary as well. So I just wanted to make that sort of broader ecosystem point that, at the end of the day, if there are very few sources of capital, there will be very few entrepreneurs as well.
Yeah, fully agree with you, Sucharita. I think, philanthropic capital is in itself not going to be enough. We will have to unlock other pools of institutional capital.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, India has one of the, good examples of priority sector regulation, which has been around for a long time. I know more than 2 decades, maybe 3 decades, maybe more. But priority sector regulation actually has allowed the growth of, the microfinance sector, which is 95% plus women, is a 150,000 crore, market, loan market today. And that's pretty powerful. I'm wondering, some of you talked about your work with policymakers, with regulators. We've seen priority sector regulation, which incentivizes finance loans to women, can do so much, right? Are there other ways in which we could engage with government, with policymakers, to make more change happen? Questions directed to the full panel.
Yeah, I think, somewhat more of a believer in market-based solutions. And, clearly going forward, I think the digitization of the microfinance industry itself, will pave the way for, digital credit to really, reach underserved customer segments, including women. I think the challenge with digital credit at low ticket sizes, with operating costs of the microfinance industry, just becomes an unviable proposition. Which is where, we think companies like Eridofin have a great role to play In working with the microfinance industry, powering them with digital payment solutions, with credit analytics capabilities, so that the benefits of all the digital infrastructure which has been built over the last few years really start to flow to underserved customers, including women.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I agree. We also, instead of looking at the government for everything, we have to look at the corporate sector, the businesses themselves, looking at this community as a source of greater profit. Let me put it this way: everything, if it is at the end of the day, is run to get towards profitability, and entrepreneurship is the business which should look at profitability. So anybody who is supporting such organizations also need to look at profitability, and I believe that supporting this community of women entrepreneurs can be extremely profitable, and there will be some organizations which led by women perhaps, which will come up and look at this as an opportunity rather than look at government to subsidize, which takes its own time and has its own leakages.